I'm Tieu. I'm an artist based in Berlin, and I mostly make installations, sculptures, videos.
And you are here in Australia for the first time. How was your impression?
Yeah, so I arrived a week ago on a very long flight with a lot of jet lag, but I was very welcomed at MoMA and been mostly installing for the exhibition that opened 2 days ago. Yeah.
Are you happy with the install and how it went?
Yes, it was a very smooth install. MoMA has a fantastic team, so I had a lot of support for the installation, and we were very well prepared for the exhibition.
Talking about the exhibition, can you let us know what the installation is about and what people can experience when they go into the gallery?
So the exhibition brings together actually 2 bodies of work. So 2 video works from 2017 and a new commission from 2023 that was first shown at Odette in Milan. So it's actually quite a big stretch of time between both these bodies of work. So the 2 films address various political incidences in Vietnam. One looks into the history of ghost tip number 10, the film No Gods, No Masters, that you see in the film, which is essentially like a slideshow that takes you through imagery taken at the sites where ghost tip number 10 was once broadcasted to the landscape. And it is juxtaposed with images of my family that I filmed during a ritual where my late grandmother, returns as a ghost, essentially, to speak to me. And the second film is called Memory Dispute, and it looks into a skin whitening treatment that is done kind of, informally. It's essentially not really allowed to do that. It's essentially kind of illegal because it uses sort of like a chemical mix from the black market that is being put onto the body of the person that wants to undergo such a skin whitening process. And essentially what the chemical does is that it sort of like separates 2 skin layers, so you can peel off the top layer of your skin. And these images are, overlaid with landscape captions from the various sites near Lang Co, near Hue, an area that was heavily attacked, not only by napalm but also by Agent Orange.
Agent Orange, and you can still see today the consequences of it, and it's still contaminated?
It's quite hard to see it directly. So the images are almost more like a speculation on how it has affected the landscape, because the forest has been regrown, but of course, the long-term effects on the soil and on the landscape is still to be seen.
Mm. So both works deal directly with the atrocities that happened in Vietnam. And they are obviously also very personally connected with your biography. Mm-hmm. And with, you deal a lot with politics, but I can imagine that you also deal with the trauma that happened to your family or to the people of Vietnam as a I think there's a collective memory. Is that Is that right?
Yes, I certainly think there's a collective memory, and specifically in those films, they actually look more into how certain beliefs have changed during or due to, for instance, Ghost Date Number 10. I think Ghost Date Number 10, the film No Gods, No Masters, looks actually more into how spiritual beliefs were utilized as a tool of war. And the juxtaposition of my family and the images of their ritual at my house is more about how spirituality has such a deep meaning in Vietnam, and how that meaning can be weaponized for various goals. But specifically within my family, spirituality is also used to insert quite traditional beliefs. For instance, the nuclear family, like my grandmother is telling me, I should have a child, I should be married, I should, stop being an artist and have a stable income. So it's also a furthering of that, of these beliefs into various directions that are very contemporary and present. But it does express certain desires that are not necessarily my own.
And it also goes back, we haven't talked about the ruler yet, but it also reflects on your work on the colonial past. Why did you go further back?
I've been looking, I think probably in all three works, into the legacies of certain events and how they have influenced the present. So why I actually went back to the ruling was due to another exhibition titled Civic Floor that is currently on show at Oakville Gallery in Oakville, Canada. And for the exhibition at Oakville Gallery, I looked into various immigration documents, and I started to measure the lines and squares and areas that the applicants had to fill in to, fulfill a certain form. So what I did is actually measure the space of the A4 page as a way to navigate through such application forms. And it dawned on me, after, much of my research, that I did everything in metric system. And I just started to question that. I was like, why am I measuring everything in metrics? Is that, surely that was not always like this. And so I just started digging deeper. And that's how I found, the traditional measurement unit. And I thought, this is so interesting that I have to make an exhibition about that. Because the Turk Daudet that is featured in the exhibition, which equals 47 centimeters, was, during French colonial time, reduced to 40 centimeters. It was a way to standardize actually various different rulers to quote-unquote simplify these units of measurement. But actually behind the argument that it would be standardized, there was also a benefit for the French, because they could tax the land, the same amount of land, for a different kind of unit size. So you essentially had they would still measure it in the Turk Daudet unit or the DN-SIG unit, but because it was shorter, they had more units, so they would tax actually the farmers for more units.
So it's a symbol
than
for
originally.
Power and greed, and how they put the power on the people.
I think it's more, for me, it's more a symbol of how the desire to measure and to quantify and to maximize profit materializes in something as tiny as a ruler. So I think it communicates a lot more than just power. I think it communicates how these small shifts also lead to the erasure of certain traditions and histories, and and how quickly these things are also forgotten. So it was fairly difficult to actually research this traditional measurement unit, and depending on which historian you follow, there are slightly different measurements as well for the ruler. So yeah, and because it mostly disappeared, there's not much about that to be found.
So there's what is your artistic your approach when you start thinking about a piece of art like that?
I think my approach is to always show something that hasn't been shown like that before. I think that's probably an ambition by every artist that I know, but it's about making certain connections that I find deeply relevant and interesting. And sometimes it is the unearthing of a certain history, for instance, for the ruling. Other times it is about the juxtaposition of two vastly different imagery that come together to create something new. So depending on the work and the content that I want to convey, the artwork takes a vastly different shape.
You say the content that you want to convey. Do you want to transport a message with your art?
I think I set a context for a message. I don't ever really express directly in the work itself a message. I think if you look at the ruling, it doesn't try to sell you something directly. I think you have the rulers on the bottom, the 47 centimeters one, that are divided, or they are engraved with lines that divide the ruler itself into smaller units. So that's actually how you walk around the exhibition and see the work. And on the 40 centimeter rulers, which are the French rulers essentially, right? The Tieu, they are engraved with statistics that the French kept to record, their own activities in, colonial. Now I have to say a colonial world, which is Indochina. But they kept all these records because they were interested in, measuring certain outcomes for themselves.
I was in that gallery and I was fascinated listening to what you said about it, because it is so multi-layered. However, it really needs your explanation. It really, you need to have that background information, because otherwise it is pretty hard. How do you make sure that people really get into your work?
I'm not sure that's necessarily always the responsibility of the artist. I think, we set out things into the world. And yes, it sometimes takes a bit of work to unearth the different layers of what the artist, or of the artist's intentions. But I think hopefully the work exists on its own, and
there's a lot of Vietnam in there, and a lot of past. How you came to Germany when you were 5 years old? How was that?
How was that? I don't think I had a choice. It was just what it was. I think as a 5-year-old, you very quickly adapt to a new situation, and I was much more busy with, learning the language and, getting into school. And that was sort of like the most important thing for me at the time.
Your work also deals with questions of migration and identity, and I wanted to ask you, what does home in terms of Heimat mean to you?
I think a home is probably, I connect home to certain people more than a specific place. I do feel rooted in Berlin. That's the city that I know best, and where I feel most comfortable in many ways. But probably much more important to me is a sense of belonging among my community. Yeah, my friends, my family.
And you just moved back from London to Berlin, didn't you?
Well, I've been back for a while.
For a while.
Yeah. But I also never really left Berlin. So I did live in London for 5 years, but I always kept a studio in Berlin. My mother's in Berlin, and I would frequently return to Berlin. So, yeah, it almost feels like I've never fully left.
Yeah. Let's talk about being an artist in Berlin. And one thing I wanted to discuss with you is that you and other fellow artists developed that case system. What is that? Can you elaborate?
Yeah, we're trying hard. CASE essentially is a communal artist sharing economy that we want to establish, and it's sort of like a testing ground for that, to think about how you can distribute sort of sales, artwork sales among artists and their galleries that represent them, in order to redistribute art sales, essentially. Because I think as artists we go through different cycles of exhibition making. We are more busy at times, less busy at other times. We go through the regular life cycles, which might involve not working for a year or two for various private reasons. And CASE is an attempt to cover that among the community through like a small percentage that you give away into a pot that then can be redistributed to all the artists.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic idea. How do the galleries react? Do they like the model?
I think the galleries actually like the model. I think there's almost more resistance among the artists, which was a surprise to us as well. Just because I think we as artists, we work so hard on within our own world that maybe there's a lot of hardship involved in that. And we come from vastly different backgrounds and vastly different ideas also of what it means to share and what to share and with whom to share. And artists bring their own communities to the table. And so, there are a lot of discussions to be had.
All right. You also, I read it in another interview, and I think it was with Monopol also, that you think that there's not much transparency in the art world. Yeah, that it's pretty difficult. Let's say the relationship between gallery and artist, and there's lots of informality. Did you do something to work on that, or are there any ideas?
Yeah, we're trying to establish, for instance, open source contracts, so that we just provide on the website, where we talk to a lot of different artists and galleries, to how to have sort of almost like a template that you can use to orientate yourself. For instance, something as banal as, is my taxi to the airport paid or not? Do I have to pay that myself? Is that part of my travel budget? How much artist fee do I get? Can I ask for an artist fee? What's maybe the parameter of fee that is fair. Of course, there are also already other models for that. You have wage in the United States, but you also have the BBK that gives guidelines to how much artist fee you can ask for. But I think especially among young artists, there's a great anxiety to do so, to just ask for very basic needs. Because you rely and you depend so much on the exhibition that you oftentimes, almost forget to also to acknowledge your own work, and that you can set demands for your labor.
Well, Berlin is the mecca for young artists, or that's what it used to be. Would you agree, or what's the situation in Berlin for artists at the moment?
I would say it's maybe almost gone. I think if I was a young artist, maybe I wouldn't move to Berlin anymore. Just because the city got expensive. It's very difficult to find an apartment. It's difficult to find a studio. And there's a great network of artists. There are fantastic artists in Berlin. But within the current climate of Germany, and also, with the economic situation, I would probably move elsewhere if I was a young artist.
If you were a young artist, or especially with females in the art, do you have any recommendations for them? Like, for example, where would you go now if you wanted to start again?
I'm not that young anymore. I'm going to say something that is totally out of date, maybe already. I don't know. I think I would, if I would think about myself, I would go to Asia.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
To Vietnam, or?
Yes, I think Vietnam, probably. Yeah.
Why?
Because it's a dynamic, it's a really dynamic place. It's a very young country. There's a fantastic art scene in Vietnam as well. I mean, I think there's a lot to be learned from my Vietnamese peers.
As you said, you are not a start-up artist, or you're not that young. You have a huge international career now. Is your work perceived differently in different countries, or?
Probably, yes. Sure, certainly, I think so. It's not always that easy for me to pinpoint, but I do think about the context that I show the work in, and how that is affected. I mean, I don't do that alone. I do that with my curators that I work with. But depending on where it is shown, there is always the context to be considered, yes.
I only have some really banal questions, but they always tell me a lot of about the person who sits there in front of me. So, what was the last good book you read?
Oh, the last good book. Well, right now I'm reading André Dau's Anam, which is a fantastic book.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm having a talk with him, an interview with him tomorrow at ACME. So that's what I'm reading right now, and it's great.
If you could time travel, where would you go and why?
I don't know. I think I'm pretty happy where I am. I think if that's the right answer, but I think as an artist, we do that every day, to travel with our ideas somewhere where we want to go.
That's a very beautiful statement. That's a very beautiful statement. And I just wanted to ask, what is the most rewarding thing of being an artist?
I think the most rewarding thing is to be in dialogue, on the one hand with your peers. So, every time I make an exhibition, I actually learn so much from my colleagues that I work with. That's not only my curators, but also, the technicians, the gallery staff. And then, of course, it is the audience and the feedback you receive from the audience, and how the work is perceived, or how people think about, different works and different ideas, and the interpretations of the works, and where it leads them within their own mind. I find that very rewarding. And I also have been enjoying working with students and be in conversation with them about art. Yeah.
Thank you so much.